Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your break. Happy Tuesday and happy first day of conference. I hope it's going well for you so far. It's a real privilege for us to be here with you today to discuss a topic which is dear to all of our hearts and one which is really important, I think, in the context of this week's conference and particularly at such an early stage in proceedings. So thank you for joining us. We'll be discussing the session title, Unlocking Potential, Joining Forces to Reduce Reoffending. And I'm joined by esteemed representatives from business, the charitable sector and law enforcement, all of who will bring a different perspective to the discussion today. Our aim is going to be to try and shine a practical light on how these different perspectives and positive influences can be captured to have the biggest impact in reoffending, a key contributor to positive social impact, as we all know. There will be time for questions and answers, so I'd really encourage you to get involved through the question facility. Not good to start with an apology, but we'll do it. You'll see that one of our panel members, Sean Scannell, was due to join us today. Unfortunately, Sean's had some connection difficulties, so we will soldier on in his absence and we'll represent him well. And he has shared some of his knowledge with us, which I can bring in at the right stage. Our colleagues will introduce themselves shortly, but I thought it would maybe be quite helpful for me to do some scene setting, if that's okay, because this may be a topic that's not familiar to everybody in the audience. We'll talk about the size of the prize, if this is about unlocking potential, in more detail shortly. But as an overarching position, the most recent government stats on proven reoffending rates showed an overall reoffending rate of 28% in England and Wales. This rises to 62% for those released from prison having served a sentence of less than a year. And it's also impacted negatively by things like age, gender, employment, and access to stable housing. And many in the audience will know that, of course, but I just wanted to position it as that currently stands. Now, percentages are one thing, but let's bring that to life. So those statistics were based on a cohort of 83,000 people, 23,000 of whom committed a proven reoffence within a year and committed over 106,000 proven offences. You'll hear a lot about costs and values over the course of the conference, and there's all sorts of measurements. But for the purposes of framing this discussion, let's think of that as 106,000 victims who are faces, who live in our communities, and who may even be us or those or people that we know. So it becomes pretty obvious that at those scales, even marginal gains on reconviction rates can have life-changing and community-changing impacts. If Sean was able to make it today, he comes from the Northamptonshire area and they do a lot of work there about synthesising data. And Sean would have brought a more localised perspective of this, sharing some of the work that he does as part of the Northamptonshire Serious Violence Prevention Partnership. But I'll just bring one extract of that to you because I think it's neat in terms of, again, putting some additional colour to where we are. As part of that, they looked at a cohort of 350 under 25-year-olds who'd been involved in serious violence. And looking at those 350 people, what they found was that they had been involved in nearly 6,700 crimes over the course of their lifetime as either a suspect or an offender, with a policing cost of around £5.6 million. Using the same Home Office costing model that got to those figures, they calculated that the physical and emotional costs of the criminality that those 350 people had been involved in was estimated at £50.8 million. There's a clear pattern in involvement in criminality, links to community deprivation, and family involvement in criminality. Okay, so enough scene setting. Let's push on. So just to introduce myself, primarily, I'm Tony Simpson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Sodexo Justice, which is a business subdivision of Sodexo, a global facilities management company with over 30,000 employees in the UK and around 400,000 globally. Importantly for today's conversation, we're proud to be one of the top 75 social mobility employers, and we launched our 2030 Social Impact Pledge this year, which built upon the successes of our 2015 pledge and includes commitments in many areas, but in the context of this discussion around inclusive work practice, sustainable employment opportunities for disadvantaged groups, including those with criminal convictions. As the Chief Operating Officer of Sodexo Justice, I'm actually a prison governor to trade with about 33 years operational experience, and we currently operate 6 prisons across the UK, looking after around 7% of the total UK prison population on behalf of government at any given moment. So I think I come to the debate as your chair today with a fairly decent understanding of both the business and the law enforcement issues which surround offenders. So enough about me. Let's introduce my colleagues on the screen, and I'll lead this. So, Dan, could I come to you first? Could you introduce yourself, please, and say a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tony, and good morning, everybody. So my name's Darren Burns. I'm the head of the Timpson Foundation for the Timpson Group. So for those of you who are unaware, the Timpson Group are the largest service retailer in the UK. You may have seen our Timpson stores, which do key cutting, watch repairs, shoe repairs, etc. But we also own a number of other businesses on the UK high street, such as Max Spielman, Jeeves, Snappy Snaps, Johnson's, the cleaners, etc. So the foundation was founded about 23 years ago now by my old boss, James Timpson. James, by chance, employed a serving prisoner in the Northwest, and the whole thing kind of grew from there. We realised that if there's one great candidate who can do a superb job for us, then there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of candidates who just need that opportunity, who just need that second chance. So we then became the largest employer of ex-offenders or people with convictions in the UK. Very proud to say that approximately 12% of our entire workforce is made up of people who we've either directly recruited from custody or who have an offending background. And these people do an absolutely fantastic job for us. And obviously there's lots of societal benefits, as Tony touched on before. So essentially, we were probably the pioneers. The pioneers or the pathfinders. Could be a bold statement, but essentially we were certainly the first UK business to scale this kind of approach to inclusive recruitment. We now spend lots of time helping other businesses, both nationally and internationally, to be as inclusive as us and to recruit from this often hard to reach cohort. We help them to develop risk assessments, we put processes in place, and we identify what's right for their business. So for us, it's simple. People deserve a second chance, and we've been able to recruit literally hundreds of people who've got convictions who would otherwise be written off and consigned to that employment scrap heap. They've gone on to do great things for our business, and obviously, as Tony mentioned before, ultimately that means because employment is a key factor to reducing crime, there are fewer victims and our communities are safer. So that's kind of what we do in the foundation.
Fabulous, Darren. Thank you. Thanks very much, and thanks a million for joining us today. Steve, could I come to you next, please?
Yes, hi. Good morning, everyone. It's a wonderful opportunity for me to be with you. I'm the founder of the Oasis Trust, and we are involved in this whole process that we're talking about this morning in more than one way. The first thing to say, though I'm not going to dwell on this, is that we have around 33,000 children, all from poor socio-economic communities, where everything is against these communities and the individuals, the families within them. We have them in our schools, them and working with their parents, because we all know that prevention is not just better than cure, is also a lot cheaper than cure as well. So in terms of unlocking potential and joining forces to reduce reoffending, actually, there's a great deal to say about joining forces and unlocking the potential to stop offending happening in the first place. But one of our schools is a very special school. It's not a project with the DFE, it's a project with the MOJ. It's called Oasis Restore. It's the country's first secure school. And as the country's first secure school, we had to have the law changed in Parliament to allow a charity and not-for-profit to run a custodial establishment. And we work with children aged 12 up to 18. So if they pass 18, they go into the adult estate. But we're an alternative to a YOI, an alternative to a youth jail, a youth prison. We are therapeutic, both in the environment. Instead of bars, there are windows. Instead of steel doors, there are good bedroom doors. We have bedrooms rather than cells. Kids live on flats similar to student accommodation rather than wings. The problem for us, or the challenge for us, is that when we took on this responsibility, government charged us, the MOJ charged us with the safe and healthy resettlement of all children leaving us, young people leaving us, into community. The last figures available from the MOJ for reoffending from the YOIs, from the youth section of their custodial work, were way above those figures that have been given by Tony for the adult constituency. The last figures from 2003 are that 82.9% of children, young people leaving custodial care, reoffended, were reconvicted within 12 months. 82.9%, 83%. And of course, we all know that if you stretched the period that you were researching from 12 months to 18 months or 2 years, that would be pretty well absolutely everyone. So what we have done in the case of Oasis Restore is we have just purchased down the road from where we are, and it's cost $750,000 to purchase, and now we have to kit it out, our own step down facility, because our discovery is that unless the stars align for a young person leaving us, by the time a yacht team is in place, etc., around them, they're back with the gang that control them, and they're back to reoffending, not within a year, but within a weekend. What every child needs as they leave a custodial establishment is a friend, a home, and a job or further education. And what we are doing through our buy-in of this huge facility, it's a giant old vicarage, is providing that. And the second thing we're doing is we're providing a place for parents to come and spend more time with their children. The property will divide up. We don't have the money to do the dividing up. This is where partnership with business, etc., helps us. We're a charity. We have to get this all through planning permission, but the way the justice system deals with children in the system is as an island rather than a member of an extended family. And it may be that there's not a dad or a mum, sometimes there is, but there's an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent there. And what we need to do is work with those people throughout the time a young person spends with us, because that's as important to their healthy and productive resettlement as the ongoing care that we give to the most vulnerable, or will be able to give to the most vulnerable beyond our gates when their sentence ends. That's what we're involved in.
Thank you, Steve. Really comprehensive there. And you've touched on a couple of points that we will come back to at some point during the discussion today, but really helpful to set the scene, Steve. So thanks a million for that. Okay, Ruth and Dan, can I maybe ask you, Ruth, first to introduce yourself, and then Dan, please. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tony. So I'm Ruth McFarlane. I'm one of the co-directors of DWRM, doing what really matters. I'm the RM part, and Dan, my business partner, will speak in a moment about himself. So we're a social enterprise. We support people in prison to do further and higher education. We both firmly believe that education is really important in offering transformative activities for people who have often been excluded from mainstream education or had really negative experiences of education. My background is that I've taught in prisons, and I've worked with people in all sorts of different alternative provisions across education over very many years. Our goal really, and the thing that we'd like to talk about today, is that people with personal lived experience of the criminal justice system are in positions of academic credibility and are articulate and able to be contributing to research and policy reform in order to join forces to reduce reoffending. We believe that the people who have had direct personal experience of this are the best ones to be offering solutions. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Dan.
Thank you, Ruth. So, hi everyone. My name is Dan Whyte. I am the DW part of DWRM. It has a double meaning for us, doing what really matters, and also Dan Whyte and Ruth McFarlane. As we've said, we are here to not just support higher and further education, but to increase its reach, its numbers across the prison estate, and its importance in the minds of those of us who make policy, those of us who design delivery plans, etc., etc. We understanding the importance of education. Everybody who's spoken previously already, even in their introduction, has spoken to the need for the reduction in reoffending. We have clear figures as to the impact that education across the board makes. I don't know how many of you guys understand or know the figures connected to higher education degrees in prison, but we're close to a 50-point swing, and we will talk more about that later. The other part about higher education in prison is the support that comes along with it and what comes after, as students transition from a student in prison to student in the community, or educated now in the community becoming an academic, or whatever that looked like, that the support needed to sustain the progress a person will make through their sentence, it falls down with the support that they get as they come through the door. Mentoring is key to that. So this is one of the other features of what we do, and the importance of bolstering the education that they receive whilst behind the door. I am someone with direct lived experience of the criminal justice, and also of studying in prison. The benefits are kind of obvious and numerous. So we will get into that a little bit later on, but thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Ruth. So yeah, for the audience, hopefully what you're seeing is a really broad perspective here. You're seeing different angles on the issue. So let's see what we can discuss as we go through this. And I'm going to start with a nice easy one for everybody, which is that, you know, the title of the talk here is about joining forces. And I suppose what's helpful to bring out is, what are those positive forces that each sector brings to the party? And what is it that gets in the way of those forces being fully actualised? So, and Darren, can I maybe start with you? It's been a while since we've heard from you. So what's your perspective on this from a business point of view, Darren?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been incredibly fortunate, and I think the reason is because we're an owner-occupied business, and we've been able to make our own decisions over the years. So through the leadership of our former CEO and our current chairman, we've been able to really sort of pick this up in terms of the ex-offender employment piece and run with it. And it's been absolutely fantastic for our business. So I believe businesses have got a huge responsibility, essentially, to do societal good. Obviously, businesses are often able to act quickly where governments aren't. We don't need to make short-term decisions because we're fearful of the electorate, and our hands aren't sort of tied behind our back. So we can make these decisions should we want to, and should they prove to be good for business. And for me, I just think working with people who are marginalised, people who have experienced the criminal justice system, people who face barriers to employment, it's just an absolutely fantastic opportunity for businesses. So the prison leavers and ex-offenders that we work with are very hard-working, they're very loyal, they're often cheaper to recruit, they will stay with us longer than people that are recruited from more traditional streams. They bring with them a great deal of life experience, personal resilience, and it genuinely has made our business a kind of a more interesting, rewarding and inclusive place to work. So for us, it's been a huge benefit. But the business benefits aside, there's the societal benefits which have been touched on earlier as well. As we said, employment is a key factor to reduce reoffending. It's been proven many times over that people who are in full-time employment are much less likely to reoffend. So that £18 billion a year reoffending cost to the taxpayer is significantly released. People are able to stay in contact with their families as opposed to losing them to long prison sentences. And by families, I mean husbands, wives, partners, children aren't losing loved ones to these long sentences. So for us, it's kind of a no-brainer. By offering people a second chance to employment, everybody wins, and our communities are safer. So I think business have got a really big part, and I think the sort of collaborative opportunities are huge as well. We're very good at doing what we do at Timpson, but we recognise that there are lots of other organisations and lots of other businesses who also do amazing things. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to join forces and to do even more good.
Thank you, Dan. Dan, just to pick up on that, because you know, we talked about the ability to move resources around, and of course, no business has got bottomless pockets. So you know that's got to be risk assessed and managed, hasn't it? But have you got anything to say really about, I suppose, the business expertise and the business perspective on what would traditionally be seen as community problems or government problems or political problems, and the different angle that a business perspective brings to that? And I suppose you've got the perfect example of having your businessman, Lord Timpson, actually as prisons minister, for example, and bringing
well,
that.
yeah, I mean, if you think that the purpose of the majority of businesses is essentially to maximise profit and to decrease expenditure, and I think when you look at some of the societal problems through that lens, whilst it's often not useful to monetize things, it can mean that the approach can be more kind of efficient. So again, we've got to be very careful here, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to look at people's numbers. We don't want to be box ticking. These are people who face cumulative disadvantages their whole lives. They've often been born into parents who are drug addicted, alcohol addicted. They've been excluded from school. They've been through the care system. So these are often people with very, very serious and complex needs and issues. So we don't want to monetize them. However, that approach can be useful, and it's certainly enabled us over the years to drive a huge amount of people who would otherwise be largely unemployed and face that sort of stigma. We've been able to get them into our workplace. We've been able to nurture them, look after them, support them, and they've gone on to do great things for our organisation. Many of them have gone on to be promoted and are still with us today. So yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but I think you've got to be careful.
Yeah, absolutely, spot on, Dan. Dan, final thing from me, just to tease this one out a little bit, and I suppose it's around, there's an assumption that sometimes business is always welcome in this arena, and that people will welcome business with open arms. Has that been your experience from a Timpson's perspective, or are there any barriers that you've seen that would be helpful for the audience or other sectors to understand?
I think there are barriers, but I think the reason we've been successful over the years is that we're very realistic. We understand, particularly with the prison population, is that, as I mentioned earlier, lots of them have very complex needs and issues surrounding very serious diagnosed mental health conditions, chronic addiction issues, homelessness, physical ailments, or a combination of all four. And quite sadly, that means that often these people aren't employment ready. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to put these people on the employment scrap heap and say that they're worthless, they've got nothing to offer. But we don't feel it's the role of business to sort of fix these people. These people need abstinence-based recovery. They need trauma-informed therapy. They need help, support. They need love. And we very much believe that should be the responsibility, first and foremost, of the state. But again, there are some amazing third sector organisations, some of them in the room today, that will provide this help and support. And then once these individuals are at a point in their lives when they can make the best of an opportunity, should they be put in front of employers.
Very well put, Darren. Thank you, and I wholeheartedly support that from my own perspective too. Steve, could I come to you? So, kind of third sector charitable organisation. What's the positive force that you bring, and what gets in the way, if anything?
Well, I've been listening to what Darren said, which I applaud. I think this is brilliantly put. What I would add, though, is this. What does the charitable sector or the not-for-profit sector bring, and what can business bring as well? The answer to that question, I think, Tony, is simply this. In my experience of life, change never, ever comes from the top. It just doesn't. People don't give up the way things are that serve them very easily. Change never comes from the bottom either, because at the bottom, people are dispossessed. They have no voice. They don't feel heard. And you see that in every sector. Where change comes, and if you look at the change in legislation in our country, great moves made forward in terms of enfranchising different communities. Take the vote being given to women. Did that come from Parliament? No, it didn't. It came from a core committed group of people who were determined to see change come around. Change comes from the middle. So the reality is, I think, it's businesses and the voluntary sector, charities, working together that create the case for change, and normally the models that bring around change. In other parts of Oasis life, because we're involved in housing, etc., anti-trafficking work, we see that government, in the end, you make changes to policies because because government, MPs, government committees can look at the difference that you make. They can measure it, they can monitor it, they can visit it, they can see it. I always think a person that they can sit down and talk to with lived experience, who is now making something of their life, is data with soul, isn't it? So I think that all of this is important. In terms of Oasis Restore, which I was talking about earlier, it's extraordinary, isn't it, that we are given, it's in writing, it's still on the MOJ website, that part of our responsibility is the safe and healthy healthy reinstallation of a person into community. But there's no resource made for that in policy. And so, as a charity leader, I've just found myself raising £750,000, which is very difficult to do from banks as well, because so many questions are asked. What we need is people to stand alongside voluntary sector organisations that take great risk and stand alongside us in taking great risk to demonstrate that an initiative will work. It's only as others see it working, as governments see something working, that they're likely to catch on to it, invite you to write a paper, go to meetings, give evidence in committees, and slowly change comes around that way. So I see the voluntary sector, for all its weaknesses, and it has many weaknesses, but I see it in terms of funding, etc., but I see it as a system change agent where it steps up, takes risks, and creates new models.
Thank you, Steve. I think the data with soul quote, certainly it's a new one to me, and I love it, and that's been picked up in the chat as well, Brendan. So yeah, very, very eloquent. I mean, Steve, from your point of view, you're very experienced in this field. Do you find when you're talking to funders or you're talking to other organisations that there is a huge divergence at the high level, though, about what people are trying to achieve and the differences in how we get there? Or do you find that there is a commonality there, and it's just making those connections with people?
I think there is a commonality, as Darren was just saying. We know, don't we? Who do we lock up in this country? Except for the occasional rogue MP, we lock up the poor. We lock up those who are dispossessed from the beginning of their lives, and their poverty is the grind, is the cause of so much that is layered on top of that. On top of poverty comes developmental trauma. On top of poverty comes the role models that you have in life, as Darren's already said. Because of their poverty, they face substance abuse and addiction, etc., etc. So you grow up in a household that doesn't create a positive role model for you. And we know that those first years of childhood brain development are so important. If the first socialization in life, which is the home background, doesn't give you the soil that you need for healthy and positive growth, by the time you enter school, and we run lots of primary schools, by the time you enter school, you're already behind. You're already behind in terms of your social and your emotional and academic development. So the school is always playing catch up. And that third socialization beyond school into society doesn't go well as a result of that. In terms of the young people that we work with in the criminal justice system, they've all committed serious violent crime, but they have all in their life, every single one of them lacked love. It was brilliant that Darren talked about love. They've lacked a place where they can feel secure and seen and known. All they've been surrounded by through their life is officers who are filling in forms with them. One young person who's been with us recently, her parents told me that they had 71 different officers from different government groups involved in analysing and assessing their child over a 10-year period. They'd adopted her at the age of 4. 71 different officers, but they said no one who truly knew her. I think that we have to do much more around this, and I think that if we can work together across our sections of society to deliver that love and that care, we can turn around the disadvantage that so many people are born into.
Excellent, Steve. Thank you. Yeah, and again, I'm glad that you picked up on, you using the word love. That's twice in half an hour that we've used the word love at a conference. Isn't that fantastic? And I hope you hear it much more over the course of the conference. As an aside, I was speaking at something fairly recently, and I used the word compassion, and I think it got a reaction from the audience that I was talking to, who I don't think expected to hear that from what they would see as hard-nosed prison business people. But I think it's really important in the context of what we're talking about. And it's
so to butt in, Tony, we're all agreed, aren't we? It's just that we have to do it, and it's the system that stops this happening. But working together, we form a powerful coalition to bring around that change. We can't wait for someone else to do it. We have to push together.
Yeah, and we may come back to that point about the so what element of this. In fact, we will come back to that, Steve. So thank you very much. Okay, so Dan, can I come to you first of all this time to give you the first word, and then Ruth can come in behind you. What's your perspective on this, Dan?
Do you know what? Ruth wanted to literally just jump in with a comment first. So
yeah.
I'll let her go before I.
Tony, if it's all right to contradict you, I want to just jump in with a little comment and then hand over to Dan, if that's all right. And like you, I'm really delighted to hear the word love being used so freely in this conversation, because it is absolutely important. And I do think that third sector organisations have a really key role to play in sort of demonstrating that. But I also just want to sort of take it a little step further and say, I would like us to look at removing the us and them situation. We're talking about people who have experienced the criminal justice system as if they are somehow other and different to us. And what we need to recognise is that actually people who have had that experience should be at the front and centre of these conversations. And that's why I wanted to just jump in before Dan speaks, that that's one of the things that we as an organisation are absolutely able to do. And I think we can draw on some other practices. Steve was rightly talking about changes to legislation. If we think about what's happened, say, for example, in the disability world, and the expression "nothing about us without us," there's no point designing a home for somebody who uses a wheelchair unless you have experience being in a wheelchair and you know what it's like to try and get through a door or reach up onto a shelf. So similarly, let's not try and design systems and solutions without it directly involving the people who have had that personal experience. And that's why I wanted to kind of jump in and introduce Dan, who is an amazing speaker and who is often touted as being the exception to the rule, and he should be an example leading where lots of others are able to also do the same.
Brilliantly put, Ruth. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Dan, over to you.
Thank you, Ruth. And I picked up on that same point as well, Ruth. Where you was talking, Steve, I completely agreed with everything you said. Apart from, I would like to add in that some of the biggest movements, some of the biggest examples of change through our histories have come from the bottom up. They started absolutely bottom up. Yeah, we can. Let's start with our civil rights movement. The US civil rights movement started absolutely bottom up, gathered momentum, took and added on people, layers, and levels of influence and business as they went on. The living wage movement, to bring it more locally. We have examples across the world. One of those that I will look at is the scientific revolution, because we look at who is now Sir Isaac Newton, but he wasn't Sir Isaac Newton then. He was just Isaac Newton, and it was his own personal curiosity that led to that movement in of itself. So, and then as we know now, it grew to become a central tenet of modern thought, and was not solely dictated by what we would call the elites, but joined forces with the elites. This is how the change is made, right? All sections of society, of the population joined together, led by somebody or something. Now, when we say lead in this instance, it's not about putting myself or himself or anyone else's self, ahead in this field. It's just about, as Ruth said, understanding what it is we need to design, redesign, change, or make a difference into, to make this provision work, to make this an impactful. At the end of the day, we fully understand the society we live in. We're not gonna, we're not abolishing this. I'm not even an abolishist. I understand the prison has its place. It's about what we do with it and what we use. So the experiences we use, as Darren said, we have, I think the last figure was 67% or thereabouts of people coming to prison have some kind of substance misuse issue. Are reading below an 11+ age or at the age they should be. So we understand that that's the education, and that is, some of the features of poverty, of socially economic disadvantage, escapism that are used where things such as alcohol and drugs start to feature. We know that if there's 67% of those who come into prison or in contact with the criminal justice system with these issues, then that means that there is a good 34% of those who don't have those issues. We look at the amount of people currently coming out into work, into education, into further education, into higher education. We look at people much like myself, but there are hundreds and thousands of people much like myself who are moving through the system, who have gone and are already, made their way back out of the system and back into, successfully reintegrated, and are making massive strides, massive differences, completing PhDs, becoming readers at university, become policy advisors, etc., etc. Some of those I even become members of your team, Steve. Yeah, and as you said yourself, Darren, these are people, and I know that there are many that are working alongside Sodexo in consultancy roles and etc., etc. So we're already utilizing the strength, the talent, the understanding, the experiences of people like myself who've come through the system. We need to do it more so. We need to just shift that focus very slightly so that, as Ruth said, we're able to use the people who lived or have lived with these disabilities, who have overcome these hardships, these socioeconomically deprived beginnings, and have risen above. And we just replicate that model. It is not something that we need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to use the same methods we have through the whole of our society, through the whole of our histories. Because if it's worked before, why would it not work now?
Fantastic. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, an interesting perspective on this. It's a chairperson's dream when you get agreeable disagreement. So thank you very much for that. It's what adds value to these things. So yeah, absolutely. Let's push on a little bit, because I want to cut to, I suppose, what might be the meat of the discussion, which is that, we're talking about joining forces. We'll hear the phrase radical collaboration over the course of the conference. And I just wanted to get people's perspective on what radical collaboration might look like. So if we open their mind a little bit, and if we've got any practical examples that we can share with the audience, that'd be excellent to try and bring it to life. But just interested in, because radical is by its very nature could be seen as quite a threatening word. So I'm just interested in everybody's perspective on that phrase and what that in their mind might bring to life as possibilities for moving forward. And again, we'll keep the rhythm going. Steve, I'll come to you in a second. We'll start off with Darren, if that's okay, and then I'll come to you, Steve. Yeah, Darren.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I think a really good example for us is that obviously we've got lots of other businesses within our network. So it's been my job over the last kind of 15 years with Timpson to effectively persuade people to hire ex-offenders, people who are marginalised, people who face barriers. And I'll be honest with you, it's been a tough job. And then people often jump to I think it's human nature. Businesses often fixate on risk when they've got no real kind of perception of risk. They often jump to the most extreme examples. So you will ask the senior business leader, either nationally or internationally, tell me what an ex-offender looks like. And they'll say, axe murderer, 6'4", heavily tattooed thug, can't string a sentence together, complete and utter nonsense. And then what we do is we work with them to develop risk assessments, to put processes in place. But what's been interesting to me is that there's been a real momentum, there's been a real change. And I think there's a real value for businesses helping other businesses to recruit from this cohort. So there was kind of the perfect storm of Brexit and a pandemic. And then after that, the labour market was quite buoyant. People needed to recruit people. We've lost people in droves who returned back to the continent. And what that led to was lots of businesses coming to us saying, listen, we love what you do in the Timpson Foundation. Please, can you help us to do the same? Now, I'm a realist. I'm not naive. I know that these businesses effectively often weren't doing this for the right reason. They were doing it because they needed people, they needed bodies, they needed workers. But either way, it had the same effect. It normalised ex-offenders being in the workplace. So I think a really good example of sort of collaborative working is business to business. And also, just to reinforce a point made by all the speakers today, the value of lived experience. We've got hundreds of colleagues who we've recruited from custody, and their voices are so valuable, and they are the most useful kind of tool in our armoury when we're trying to convince other businesses to recruit from this cohort. So what they do is that they expect these 6'4" heavily tattooed thugs, and then what they do is they meet our colleague Sarah. Sarah, very unassuming, very articulate, very intelligent, has got an absolutely heartbreaking story. We often speak to these other businesses. We say that we're big on giving people second chances, but often these people, it's the first chance that we're giving them. There's some of the reasons that Steve touched on earlier, because of the lack of positive early socialisation, because there's cumulative issues that they've faced in terms of being excluded from school, being in the care system. They've not had the support, the nurturing that everybody needs to thrive. It's often the first chance that we're giving them. So I think collaborative working can come in many forms, but our expertise, I suppose, is business to business. But we also work very successfully with the third sector as well. So we've got a number of kind of organisations that we work with that will refer people. They will do the hard yards with prison leavers. They'll give them all that initial support. We all know that prison is an incredibly dehumanising and traumatic experience for most. So people will need that support, certainly when they get released from prison, just to get them back on an even keel, just to allow them to sort of process what they've been through, to reinvent themselves as not being the prisoner, but the Timpson employee or the trustworthy member of society. Again, people need that time to get through those critical sort of few weeks and months. And the third sector are absolutely fantastic at doing that, and then sending candidates to us, which we can nurture, we can employ, we can develop.
Thank you, Darren. And I think you picked up on that notion of, each sector respecting and understanding what the other sectors bring, and factoring that into the journey, if you like, as well as with the person at the
Tony, can I just interrupt for a minute, just to make a point which I failed to make earlier? I think one of the issues is that people see it as quite binary. So people see businesses, they've got one primary function, which is to maximise profit and reduce expenditure, and then social value is second to that. What we've managed to do at Timpson is we've managed to successfully combine the two. So we are a profitable business. We're a very commercial business. We don't shy away from that. We make pots of money. We're very good at what we do. But we are sort of compassionate capitalists. We treat our people really well. We're really kind. Our culture is based around kindness and compassion. So the two aren't mutually exclusive. You can do both. You can be a successful business. You can earn lots of money. You can be very commercial, but you can also do lots of societal good and individual good as well by helping your employees.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. I'm glad you came back in on that, Dan. It's a really good point. And in Sodexo Justice, we've got a phrase which is values-based commerciality, which I think is another way of saying the same thing that you're talking about, that you can be both. It's not either or. It's possible to be both. So yeah, thank you for picking up that point. Steve, do you want to come in?
Yeah. Just again, building on the back of that, Tony, not to be sycophantic, but Oasis has enjoyed a really great relationship with Sodexo in many ways. And the last time I talked to other people in Sodexo outside of the justice sector, but into your catering provision, was yesterday. So we're working on two schemes together. Developing ideas that will bring together again the voluntary sector, the third sector, and Sodexo through next year in working to empower local communities. And it's on that point I wanted to pick up and just clarify what I was saying about the top, the middle, and the bottom. Actually, to take your point, Dan. The reality is, if you look at the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King and friends, and there were many of them with lots of backing from people, they were the middle. That's what I mean by the middle. That's what I mean. They were organized, they had a strategy, they had disciplines, they brought together various groups, and it was those various middle groups working together that pushed the political institutions to policy and legislative change in the end. And what I mean by at the bottom is the wonderful people. If you take outside of talking about justice specifically, I mean, the number of wonderful teachers that I know and head teachers in individual schools who want to campaign for change around the way that our education system works. Because part of what we've been talking about this morning is an education system that works for some and not for others, and leaves some behind. They have more detentions than pass exams, and that makes them feel unwanted. They drop out. What goes first in a child's education is their engagement. What comes second is their attainment. Necessarily, when your engagement's gone, your attainment falls apart, and then comes your attendance. And once you're not in school, you're standing on that social housing estate, and you're fodder for being groomed and exploited and ending up in the criminal justice system. There's that long trail from school to prison, isn't there? And I talk to school teachers down on the ground who understand all this but can't get a voice. What we've all got an opportunity to do in this social value conference is to commit ourselves again to working together in coalition, voices in the middle, to bring about change at the top. Because, as I say, there's no point in waiting for that change to somehow end up there otherwise. So that's, Tony, in your terms, what I think radical collaboration and joining forces is all about.
Fantastic, Steve. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ruth, Dan?
Yeah,
So,
thanks.
yeah.
You
Good. You want to go first?
I want to just reiterate, I made a point in the chat about humanizing this, and to really stress that what we would like to see is people not just being employed sort of at the low end of the scale as labourers, although that is obviously important, but also in more senior and leadership roles, so that it becomes the norm. We need to remove the fear factor about people who have been to prison, because we're just people. And what we want to be seeing is that genuine commitment, not a tokenistic, can you come and act as a consultant and we'll pay your train fare and give you lunch, but a genuine commitment to employing people at more senior levels who are actually able to have that influence. And that's where we feel that organisations like ours can support with helping to develop policy, support with recruitment, just introduce organisations to people who are very capable and very articulate and very well qualified, and who are able to demonstrate those leadership qualities, so that your organisation can see this is what people who've been to prison actually look like. Like, Darren was describing about that sort of fear factor of, what people might be, and are they going to be all very, threatening and so on. No, actually, most people are really just very ordinary people, and they're also very capable. So let's look at how we humanise this and properly engage with real people.
Yeah, absolutely, Ruth. I think, as you were saying, Steve, you could have been talking about me in my early. You described me in my early years. We talk about first and second chances. We didn't really have a first chance. So what we were able to do was take advantage of the first opportunity. Was take advantage of those elements of early years that we should have had at the beginning. So we may have started later and behind the line, but we're catching them caught up in that respect. Yeah? This has only been made possible because, as you were saying, Darren, about love. Let's use the word love again. I don't think we can use it too much in this setting, but we talk about it again in terms of absolutely. I find it hard to view someone negatively when, as a criminal, as that 6 foot whatever tattooed thug you mentioned, when that person started life without any love. They started without any love, so they was never given that opportunity. It's not like they had that and then decided I didn't want to use or have love in my life. I wanted to behave like this. They never had it, so they just followed a path that we, you know, the life set for them effectively. We introduce love at some point in their lives, and then we have to then continue that. We have to continue that in the way, in our approach effectively. You know, we still have an approach, which means give us somebody a fair opportunity, not look at them as that, as a thug, or give them a title or a name, and we know how deceiving looks could be. Yeah, taking people at first, you know, for first appearances is always generally wrong, right? So when we look at that, and then just to put together us sitting on this panel right now, we are, when we collaborate in the third sector, Steve will tell you this himself, when we collaborate ourselves within the third sector, we will have a group of organizations we bring together, and everyone has a skill set, everyone has just a part to play. Whatever it is you can bring to the table, you bring. So whether we're talking across the third sector, business, government, policy, etc., we just need to employ the same method and the same model, in terms of we put all our skills and our resources on the table, and we use what everyone brings to that table, because then it becomes the sum of all of our parts effectively. I think we, as we were talking about, collaboration has to be true in this sense. You're correct, Steve, that middle voice, that voice that speaks to, that voice that speaks to, you know, the whole situation, has to be made up of multiple voices, those from the top, those from, as you said, the bottom, those of us with that lived experience, and those of us who've successfully navigated it and continue to do so. And if it's done with love, then across the board, we will be able to provide real, first in a lot of instances, chances, and second chances for those who didn't get it right the first time.
Dan, thank you. Yeah, and listen, thanks to everybody. I've been keeping a little eye on the chat. Not too many questions. Quite a lot in there about vetting. I think we've covered off some of that, but I think if I just give you a practical example that shows what is possible, and you know, others may relate to this. In one of our prisons, a member of our senior leadership team, key carrying, fully vetted, in charge of addictions control, has served a prison sentence. Yeah, it's possible. If you can be a key carrying member of a prison senior leadership team, you can be employed places. That's not everywhere, but just as an example of what is possible. So let me try and summarise. Firstly, thank you very much to panel members for speaking with eloquence, passion, expertise. I hope the audience have found it interesting and energising. I know I certainly have. Today was never about solving the world. Today was about putting some energy into this and to get everybody thinking about what is possible, and hopefully there's some food for thought for you in there. But maybe just a couple of things from me. You know, let's just understand what we as individuals and organisations bring to the party. If we don't understand that, then we don't know what we contribute. Let's be inquisitive and find out what other partners and agencies bring to the party, and let's have those conversations. You know, it's not organisations who do things; it's people, isn't it? And it's the people who make those up. So I think we've all got a personal responsibility, whichever sector we work in, to grasp the nettle and see what we can do. You will be surprised that when you look at outcomes, how easily things start to align at an outcome level, and then it's just a question of the how rather than the what, and that opens up lots and lots of doors. And a key point that we can't do this to people. We've got to do this with people. We've got to bring people with us. We've all got a voice in this one. And I suppose the final ask for us all is, for those of us that are attending the conference over the next few days, let's get the love word count up there. Yeah, and let's see if we can get it into at least double figures by the end of the conference, and that would be a real success if we can do that. So pretty much bang on time, I think, everybody, just to keep us all on track. Thank you once again, Dan, Ruth, Steve, Darren. Really appreciated your contribution today. Thank you once again for that.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your session, everybody. Thank you very, very much for giving up your time to join us today. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.